Hello and good evening. My name is Nick Burlick, and today I will be discussing how two managers play varying roles when it comes to the management of internal and external stakeholders and how other associated business entities throughout their day-to-day operations operate. My two interviewees are Sarah Kelly and Julian Willoughby, who come from contrasting organisations. Throughout this presentation, we shall delve into both parties identifying primary and secondary stakeholders, issues and conflicts that arise in their management of said stakeholders, and finally, the way each party deals with both the ideology of shared value and societal issues associated with their business. As I just pointed out, Sarah Kelly works for McDonald's, quite possibly the largest fast food franchise in the world. Sarah's worked at McDonald's for the past 7 years and currently manages the offices store here in Victoria. Her role also includes conducting the hiring for the region, completing training of new staff, and ensuring that the rosters are completed. Sarah is in charge of 120 staff working under her and can have up to 13 staff working with her at any time. What are stakeholders? Stakeholders are individuals or groups with an interest in the project, program, or portfolio because they are involved in the work or affected by the outcomes. As you can see on the screen in front of you, I've listed the primary and secondary stakeholders that Sarah has a relationship with. As McDonald's is a customer-based business operation, it is the number one primary stakeholder that Sarah encounters on a day-to-day basis would be the customer, followed by employees and managers. In this instance, you can see that there are many more primary stakeholders compared to secondary stakeholders. The argument here can be made that, as previously mentioned, given that McDonald's is a consumer-based operation with a for-profit outcome, there are always going to be more primary stakeholders than secondary stakeholders. This will be further investigated when we evaluate Gillian and her association with the Gippsland Caravan Club. As we proceed to the next slide, we dive into Sarah's stakeholders' priorities. These stakeholders can be further broken down to external and internal to the business. Internal stakeholders are immediately involved within the business and are often employed by said business, whereas external stakeholders are generally external to the business, such as customers or suppliers. Based on these classifications, we can determine how Sarah behaves with each stakeholder and the level of priority that each receives. Sarah implements herself as an instrumentalist. An instrumentalist aims to increase the self-interest of the manager with these stakeholders. That is, the manager is focused on the operational outcomes that the business receives. This is further compounded by the stance that the organisation portrays itself. The McDonald culture in the recent years has come under large media scrutiny from the consumer groups in the way they display certain foods and advertise their products. This dramatic rise has forced McDonald's and its employees to change the way individuals like Sarah need to portray themselves. By employing the strategic morality stream of operations, it appears as though Sarah and the organisation are acting morally. However, it still presents itself in a way that is economically advantageous. During the interview with Sarah, I asked the question regarding the challenges she faces on a day-to-day basis. Being in charge of such a large and diverse group of individuals is often challenging, not to mention that customers expect things to be perfect, however also be completed in the shortest amount of time possible. As you can see on the screen in front of you, some of the challenges Sarah faces includes employee issues, customer interactions, both positive and negative, and of course meeting the store budget that is set for every shift. In order to overcome these challenges, Sarah is required to ensure that she employs a multitude of disciplinary tactics and approach every scenario differently. For example, when dealing with customers, the way Sarah acts is dependent on the customer itself. It is no good dealing with a customer complaint with the authority style if the customer is only 7 years old, whereas the same customer complaint may not be able to be solved by dealing with the customer the same way that Sarah would have appropriately dealt with a 7-year-old. As you can see from the table on the screen, I've listed a few conflict resolution management styles that may be applied to certain situations. As the Executive Connection states, there is not one leadership style that fits all. When I first asked Sarah about shared value, she didn't exactly quite understand what was being asked. However, when I explained to her that shared value is creating economic value in a way that also creates value for society by addressing its needs and challenges, she began to explain to me the charity events that they run on an annual basis and how it does not only benefit the charity itself, but the store itself also sees a higher turnover percentage for that day. On average, McHappy days, Sarah informs me they are at least 50% busier than their normal days. This takes me to my next point, that Sarah and the McDonald's staff are implementing moral behaviour. This is conducting a practice that is mutually beneficial towards society, however at the same time it is economically beneficial for the organisation itself. The final question I asked Sarah was in regards to societal issues and how McDonald's, and in particular her officer store, either combat this or try and promote a social issue in a positive manner. Sarah highlighted that given the large-scale nature of McDonald's, she believes that they should be ethically responsible in some shape or form and be able to make a difference in today's society. This contribution should be to an issue that they may have either contributed towards willingly or unknowingly. As Sarah touched on previously, McDonald's recent change towards healthy options may have cost the company $35 million in the US. However, the appearance towards fixing the social issues is of greater benefit than the overall cost of making the change to menus and new advertisements. The organisation is no longer having to deal with customer complaints regarding the issue, and Sarah herself has said that during this time, she's seen a notable difference in customer issues relating to the food displays. This moral identification can be seen as McDonald's meeting its moral obligations to the ever-growing push towards society and obesity. Gillian Willoughby is a 73-year-old retiree who volunteers and is a part of the Gippsland Caravan Club. Gillian has held numerous positions since their inception in 2007. These roles have included club president, secretary, and she currently holds a position on the committee. The Gippsland Caravan Club is a non-for-profit organisation that allows its members to gather at particular locations throughout the year to explore new parts of Gippsland and hold events such as charity nights and trash and treasure days. These proceeds go to various causes, including most recently last year's state rally, the Royal Flying Doctor Service as its beneficiary. Being such a small organisation, there is a stark contrast between the number of stakeholders that both individuals have to deal with on a daily basis. As you can see, Gillian does have more primary stakeholders than secondary stakeholders, the same as Sarah. However, there is a larger number of stakeholders that Sarah has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. You will note, however, that there is a stark contrast to the types of stakeholders, that being internal and external. Given that the organisation is not for profit, the list of stakeholders is primarily external, as Gillian has to deal with more parties in order to ensure the organisation continues to operate. The not-for-profit organisation can be deemed as a moralist culture. This is compared to Sarah, whose role is primarily deemed as instrumentalist. The moralist culture is where the stakeholder primarily takes into account external stakeholders, even if it is not seen as beneficial for themselves. Gillian regularly practices habits like this through purchasing raffle tickets or purchasing items for the club, which would ultimately leave her out of pocket. However, the selling of these raffle tickets ends up going to charities as proceeds. Similar to the stakeholder priority, there is a vast contrast between Gillian and Sarah and the challenges that both parties face. The solution style, however, that Gillian must also incorporate is different. The vast difference between the two parties is that Gillian does not at all portray the authoritarian style of management at any point. If Gillian were to implement the authoritarian style of management, she runs the risk of losing the stakeholder as a key beneficiary. Gillian relies more on external stakeholders more than internal stakeholders, and therefore a lot of her management style needs to be quite passive, as the majority of the time the service they require is needed at a discounted rate, compared to the profit organisation which Sarah is a part of. She's able to display the authoritarian style of management at numerous stages, as money is often changing hands, meaning that there is some sort of standard or quality that must be upheld. The theory of shared value is essentially how the Gippsland Caravan Club operate. Their primary target is to raise money for charities while also contributing to the local economy. While Sarah and McDonald's raise money on an annual basis, Gippsland Caravan Club hold events every month. These events have raffles and charity drives which aim to raise money for charities such as the Royal Flying Doctor Service and the Salvation Army. As stated in the slide in front of you, moralist culture have a genuine concern for stakeholder interest. Jones, Phelps and Bagley continue on to state how the way a firm manages actually respond to stakeholder issues is interwoven with notions of how they should respond, indicating that if all internal stakeholders commit to the social issue, then the outcome will be preferred. The moralist culture also indicates that the moralist party is submissive in their requests to the stakeholder, whereas McDonald's only appear to be submitting to society's wishes, however are still fulfilling their economic needs and desires. To summarise, there is a vast difference between the two parties and the way they communicate, deal, and interact with stakeholders in all formats. Sarah and her organisation have a larger number of internal, primary, and secondary stakeholders. The managerial issues that both parties face and the way that they are handled also differ. Gillian, being a not-for-profit volunteer, does not have as much bargaining power as what Sarah does. Sarah has the ability to demand more of her employees and as such has the ability to invoke competing conflict avenues, whereas Gillian must compromise in order to seek the best outcome from the external parties. My name is Nick Verleek and thank you for listening to my presentation.